The year 2025 began with a familiar tension, an uneasy sense that the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. It was like the quiet before a storm, a moment of deceptive calm that made everyone wonder what was coming next. The global economy was holding its breath, supply chains steady but fragile. Every link in the chain stretched thin, hoping not to snap. Everyone remembered the last time chaos struck. Headlines screamed panic, markets tumbled, and late-night tweets sent shockwaves across continents. In early 2025, anxiety was everywhere. Companies drafted backup plans, governments held nervous meetings, and ordinary people braced for the unknown. It was the uneasy calm before the hurricane's return, a silence that felt almost ominous. People tried to ignore the warning signs, sipping overpriced coffee and hoping the global system wouldn't collapse again. But the tension was impossible to escape. In Washington, D.C., anticipation was thick. A new, yet familiar administration was settling in, and the world watched closely. Would it be the dealmaker, the disruptor, or something else entirely? The uncertainty was palpable. Diplomats watched social media for clues, searching for any hint of what might come next, knowing that a single post could change everything. The real problem was uncertainty. Businesses can handle good or bad news, but not a giant question mark hanging over every decision. The world was on edge, waiting for the next move in a high-stakes game where every choice could tip the balance. The global economy, a web of deals and trust, was about to be tested like never before, with every nation and company watching closely. The only question, how bad would the storm be, and who would survive when it finally passed? The world could only wait and hope. Then, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. The anticipation in the air was electric, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Donald Trump returned to the spotlight, stepping onto the stage with his signature confidence, and announcing a bold new plan that would send shockwaves through the political and economic landscape. There was no gentle re-entry for Trump. This was a cannonball into the deep end of global trade, a move that would disrupt the status quo and demand the world's attention. He declared a sweeping 60% tariff on all Chinese imports, a number so high it seemed almost unthinkable. 60%. This wasn't a negotiation tactic, but a declaration of economic shock and awe, a move designed to rattle markets and adversaries alike. The message was clear: America first, but now supercharged, louder and more forceful than ever before. Trump painted a picture of jobs stolen by China, factories shuttered, and promised that American manufacturing would return almost overnight, as if by sheer willpower. "We're going to hit them so hard their heads will spin," he boasted, his words echoing through the crowd and across the airwaves. Markets panicked instantly, investors scrambled, and the world braced for impact, uncertain of what would come next. The White House insisted this bold move would force China to the negotiating table, finally ending years of what they called failed diplomacy and empty promises. Officials argued that the U.S. economy was strong enough to take the hit, while China's would be pushed to the brink, setting the stage for a new era of economic dominance. It was a high-stakes gamble, a game of chicken with trillions of dollars and millions of jobs at risk, and the world watching every move. But this was about more than just economics. It was a show of strength, a spectacle designed for headlines and primetime news. Details were vague, consequences largely ignored, as the administration focused on the drama and the message. The headline was all that mattered: Trump takes on China. It was a rallying cry for his supporters and a warning to his rivals. For the rest of the world, it was terrifying. Allies and adversaries alike watched with growing concern, unsure of what this new era would bring. They were no longer just spectators, but now found themselves as collateral in a tariff tsunami, swept up in the chaos. The global order was about to be upended, and no one could predict how far the shockwaves would reach or who would be left standing when the dust settled. The White House miscalculated. China didn't flinch. Instead of backing down, Beijing stood its ground, ready for a fight. Beijing struck back fast, announcing retaliatory tariffs targeting key U.S. industries, sending a clear message that they wouldn't be intimidated. Soybeans, bourbon, tech, American exports that suddenly faced steep new barriers. Farmers, distillers, and tech giants all felt the sting. The message from Xi Jinping was unmistakable. You want a trade war? You've got one. Shockwaves hit global markets, wiping out billions in value overnight. Allies in Europe and Asia scrambled, caught in the crossfire, unsure how to respond as the world's two largest economies clashed. Supply chains were suddenly at risk, the G7 in disarray, as companies worldwide braced for disruption. China's response wasn't just tariffs. American companies in China faced new obstacles, delays, surprise inspections, and even abrupt shutdowns. Beijing wielded non-tariff weapons, making life miserable for US businesses, squeezing them with red tape and uncertainty. At home, China launched a propaganda blitz, painting the US as a bully and rallying its people behind the government's tough stance. The tit-for-tat escalated, each side raised the stakes, ignoring the damage, as threats and counter-threats filled the airwaves. It was a vicious cycle: tariffs, retaliation, threats to double down. Negotiations stalled and trust evaporated. Like two rivals throwing bricks, neither noticed their own glass houses shattering, as the costs mounted on both sides. The US bet that China would fold was a massive miscalculation. Instead, the standoff only hardened. The dragon roared back and the global economy started to burn, with markets tumbling and investors panicking. The world watched in horror as the two giants fought with sledgehammers, threatening global stability. The fallout was immediate and the pain was spreading. Factories idled, shops closed, and workers feared for their jobs. No one was safe from the economic firestorm. Families, businesses, and entire countries braced for what would come next. The trade war had truly begun, and the world would never be the same. The tariff war wasn't just headlines, it hit everyday people hard. Prices climbed, phones, tools, groceries, all more expensive. Consumers paid a hidden tax, their wallets the battlefield. Businesses panicked. Supply chains built over years broke overnight as costs soared. Companies scrambled for alternatives, but you can't reroute global trade with a snap. In the US, farmers watched crops rot, port workers saw ships idle. In China, factories laid off thousands. The very workers tariffs were meant to help were the first to suffer. The promise of bringing jobs back faded as existing ones vanished. The chaos spread. The US threatened tariffs on European cars, opening new fronts. The rules of global trade were gone, replaced by uncertainty. Businesses stopped investing, unable to plan for the future. The global economy, built on stability, now ran on anxiety. The plan to punish China was punishing everyone. The world was caught in a storm of its own making. Amid the chaos, Canada took a different path. New Prime Minister Mark Carney, a seasoned finance expert, saw opportunity in the turmoil. When the US pressured Canada to join its anti-China crusade, Carney refused. Canada stood firm friends, not sidekicks. Carney's approach was assertive diplomacy, calm, fact-based, and clear. He spoke on global TV, championing free and fair trade, warning that protectionism hurts everyone. Canada reminded the US it was their largest trading partner, and stability was in everyone's interest. This bold stance surprised the world. While others cowered or conceded, Canada drew a line. It was risky. Carney could have made Canada the next target, but he bet that strength and reason would win over fear. Carney didn't just stand firm, he went on offense. In a global address, he proposed a radical idea: a true free trade zone with the US, zero tariffs, zero barriers. It was political jujitsu, turning America first into a challenge. If you want fair trade, here it is. The White House was cornered: accept and win, or reject and look hypocritical. The world watched as Carney's plan shifted the narrative. Instead of fighting fire with fire, Canada offered water, tearing down walls, not building them. Business leaders on both sides rallied behind the proposal, desperate for stability. The US administration was caught off guard, scrambling for a response. Canada's strategy became a global model: set the agenda, don't just react. Other nations took note. Proactive vision could trump defensive panic. Carney's bold move contrasted with others' damage control. Canada wasn't just surviving the storm, it was charting a new course. The world started to listen. Pressure mounted on the White House as the trade war dragged on. Rising prices and struggling farmers took a political toll. Canada's zero-tariff proposal made the administration's chaos look unreasonable. Suddenly, Trump reversed course, rushing a deal with China. The result? A messy truce. China agreed to buy more US goods, but the real issues remained. The 60% tariffs were suspended, but the damage was done. Trust was shattered, supply chains altered, economies bruised. The lesson: trade wars are easy to start, brutal to win, and everyone pays the price. Canada's proactive strategy became the new model for middle powers. Carney's assertive diplomacy and bold vision changed the conversation. The scars of the trade tempest remained, a warning of the cost of turning partners into enemies.